Today we are going to take a look at one of the most interesting and yet subtle parts of working with web technologies in Designer, and that is the use of selectors. You are going to use selectors almost every day in every single document, so it's kind of important for you to learn at the very least the basics, but you're going to realize throughout this video that there is a whole lot more to it than just putting a style on a single paragraph. Let's take a look. The selectors are used in two different places in the Connect Designer software. The first one is for actual style sheets. So essentially all the colors and the styling that you see inside of the template is CSS, which is sometimes applied using selectors. Let me show you, for example, if I go in the print style sheet, and I go under print here, these are all the styles that are using selectors. We're going to take a look at the basic selectors in a second. I just wanted to show you that we already have some of them that are applied. The second place that selectors are used is in the scripts pane, because the scripts need to know what they are going to be applied to, and that is using selectors. So there's all of the style sheet selectors we'll see in a second, as well as the text selector that is by default when you drag a field inside of your template. The three different selectors that you have for applying styles inside of your document are the element, the class, and the ID. The way that you have to look at it is the element is the HTML tag that is, for example, in this case, I'm clicking on a paragraph and I have the P at the top here. If I click on a table cell, the element is TD for the cell, TR for the row, Thead for the whole header, and table, the first part, for the whole table. And all of these elements can be affected by styles. The second thing that you have is the class. Now, a class is essentially a tag that you can put on one or more elements, and you can apply more than one class to each element. So if I say highlight, special, bold, then this actually applies three separate classes to this paragraph that I have. Now, this won't do anything for now because I haven't specified these classes. They don't actually exist. They're just tags on the paragraph. The last selector for style sheets is the ID selector. So my paragraph, for example, is an ID, and the ID has to be unique on the element. Essentially, if you have the ID on one element, the first one inside of the code will be the one that's affected. It's for performance reasons, which we will see more at the end of this video. Now, in terms of scripts, the last basic selector that you have is the text selector. So if I have the full name here, and we know that the text selector can apply to more than one element, so it's similar to the class selector in a sense, but the text selector is a full search and replace inside of the whole document. Meaning, if I add the same, if I can find my key here, if I add that same text somewhere else, it will also affect it. So that is specific to the scripts. There's no text selector in the CSS language. We added that. Now, one last note is that you can actually combine these selectors. So if I go under selector and text, and I say paragraph, find text, full name, then this will only affect the text full name that is inside the paragraph. As you can see, the ones that are in the TD at the top were not affected. This is one way to refine your selectors under specific circumstances. Now, scripts will use all the various selectors and even combination of these selectors using the top bar here. So the selector here will refer to the three different selectors plus the text one that we've seen. Now, the one at the top here, which is either pound sign, hashtag, or number sign, depending on which generation you're coming from, this refers to an ID. So this means that there is one element with the ID, statement, number, barcode. So this script will only affect that specific ID. If I created a new script and I put the dot highlight, for example, then this would affect any element that has the class highlight. And if I had a script that said, for example, P, then this would affect all of the paragraphs. The selectors are used exactly the same in scripts and in style sheets. So if I go under Edit Style Sheets and I go under Print here, you may start to recognize the way that these are made. So body refers to the body element, which is the whole template, like globally. Any style that you apply to body will be applied to all of the text and elements on the page. Then you have the header also, which is there, and that is a specific HTML element. You have a couple of classes here that are used and specific IDs. Now, there are a couple here that look really complex, and I'm not going to go into them, but sufficient to say that these are more fine-tuned or fine-grained control over the different things that you can do. So one important note is something about performance. This will matter to some of you, especially those that are creating either very complex documents or very large jobs. It might not seem a lot to have a couple of milliseconds difference between the different uses of these selectors, but trust me, if you're printing 200,000 invoices, those milliseconds start to add up. So, a note about performance. Now, I have two final notes for you, which you can kind of consider addendums. The first one is about performance, and some of you that are doing especially complex documents and very large document jobs will be very interested by this. It's in terms of the different performances of the selectors that I've just showed you. Because shaving off a few milliseconds on the selector before going into the script and enhancing the script so that it's more efficient will be very visible in the long run in very large jobs. So the first thing is the text selector is the slowest because it has to look through each and every single element and text bit on the page for that specific string before doing that search and replace, and then it continues until the end of the document. So that is the slowest. Of course, that's only for scripts. One way to make it faster is to first use a selector, especially the ID selector, before it. And I'm going to show you this really quickly. There's one example here that kind of looks like it. You see here invoice items, T-head, TD. It is specifically looking for a cell in the header of the invoice items table, and then it's looking for the subtotal text. This is the way that is the most efficient. So if you can do that, even if you reduce it with an element, a class selector, so you use the hybrid type, that's the best way to do it. The second slowest in terms of scripts and the first slowest in terms of style sheets, you get the gist of it, is the element selector, because it still has to look through the whole structure of your HTML, look through each element, and whenever it finds one specific element, then it applies its styles or its script to it. So that is the second slowest selector. The third slowest is the class selector, because you can have more than one class on each element, and because more than one element can have that class, then it still has to look through the whole document. And the fastest and most efficient way to use selectors is to use IDs. Now, obviously, you can't use IDs for everything, because if you have more than one element that needs to be affected by a style, you can't. But whenever you can, use an ID selector because that is the most efficient one that is present. And the very last thing that I want to show you on my screen here is if you Google the word selectors, because the word selectors is used 99.9% of the time for CSS, you will get all the results that you want. The first one, the CSS selector reference for W3 schools, is a very useful reference. It does cover all of the ones that I've shown you. So the dot class for the class, and then the pound for ID, and then the element specifically. And then it goes on to all of the possible selectors that you can have. Don't worry, even if they look complicated, they are not. They're very well explained, and you can even click on any of these selectors and then look at how they're used, all their definitions, the tips, all of that, and then you can try them right here inside. And when you change that, see right here, that's active link. See, it went yellow there. So you can change that, you can use them, you can test them, etc., etc. Another one that I would like for you to take a look at is the 30 CSS selectors you must memorize. And I kind of agree with this title. There's some of them are a little less used in terms of designer and in the web in general, but I really do pretty much agree with all of this. So star for affecting everything, the ID and the class, we've already seen that, and the siblings and the pseudo selectors and the children selectors, the attribute selectors, all of these are in various levels pretty important to use in Connect. So actually, like this is a perfect example, checked. If you look at this one, this looks at any radio button that is checked, aka a check mark or one of these, multiple selections. This lets you affect the style of the selected option in an HTML form, which is used for web context as well as capture on the go documents. So, like typical examples, really, really, really awesome. And this concludes today's Connect with Evie. I hope you learned something new today. If you have any questions, comments, things you want me to talk about, please don't hesitate to sound off in the comments below. Subscribe if you want to hear about any new videos that I come up with. And as always, see you in a few clicks.